we as men, there's a lot of times that we do something that is so foolish that we don't think about at times. I brought up in our pre-show discussion how, like, as guys, how many times have we sat there and it's the first time we go on this date with this beautiful woman and we try to act that's like somebody that we're not thinking that, you know what, if this relationship lasts, you got to live up to that falsehood.
Yeah.
Or that long-standing memory that she's going to have is, this idiot tried to tell me that he was Batman, when we first started dating.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, what are some of the other things that we as men do that we truly make fools of ourselves because we don't think about what we're doing?
I'll come on to that in a minute, but I've just literally reflected on what you said. It's not just that thing where we meet a woman, we try and impress them and put across an image that isn't the case. You can also, I come across friends who have met a woman and the woman's gone, oh, I would love to have kids and settle down. They've gone, yeah, I would like to have kids and settle down, but no, they've actually been thinking more with their penis than actually that. And unfortunately, they get involved with that woman that starts to lead into a longer relationship. And then they're all stuck in a relationship they don't want to be in because they've not been honest from the beginning. And that can have really catastrophic effects. And I know a man who unfortunately continued with that bravado, and the woman got pregnant and she had a child, and he exited stage left.
Yeah.
And that's awful, not just for the woman, but for the child who's come into the world, who at some point will know that daddy never wanted him because all daddy wanted to do was get his end away and not actually, roll into that relationship. So, yeah, I know that's happened. I've worked with some men who have been in that position. But it's too late then, isn't it, when a child's out in the world to go, April Fools of the start of our relationship. It wasn't meant to go that far. Too late, isn't it?
I think one of the other things that I've experienced was, somebody, you get into a relationship with a person that says, oh, I love kids. I love kids. You find out that you've got a couple kids and now they've already committed to that. I can tolerate kids when this person actually can't stand kids.
Yeah.
And this is a personal, I've experienced this before. That, and then there's this huge conflict for all these years because, oh yeah, I love kids. Oh, thank God I love kids so damn much. And now I'm stuck, I'm rattled with this person's children.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it really is, it's so important, Joel, that you don't try to create who you're not. You've got to live within yourself. You got to live with who you are. I mean, look, let's be honest, if you have to make up, and I think we said this on the last show, Joel, that if you have to make up who you are for them to like you, they don't like you.
Yeah.
You have to be honest with yourself or you're going to get yourself in trouble, right?
Absolutely. And, I guess the examples we're talking about here is of a start of a new relationship. And if you're not authentic, if you're not open and real, the problems that could then lead to as that relationship progresses. But also what we talked about, which is also important, is the other end, that when you are in a relationship that perhaps you were authentic at the beginning with you and husband, wife, whatever floats your boat is irrelevant. That, as we know, things can change over time, Zach. You know what I mean? When a honeymoon period's over, it's and shit starts to go wrong and that can happen. If your feelings start to change towards that person for whatever reason, be honest with them. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, it's no fun flogging a dead horse, is it? From that degree. And I think there's quite a lot of people out there, and I've worked particularly with when that term with men who have had catastrophic fallouts from the breakdown of a marriage. Whereas if they would have actually been open and honest like years before, it wouldn't have perhaps been as catastrophic in regards to the fallout from that relationship. I mean, in those cases, they would have done it earlier. Perhaps, you know, what you were saying, there wouldn't have been kids, there wouldn't have been a house, there wouldn't have been all this stuff going on. Maybe there wouldn't even be marriage. Do you know what I mean? When I look at my own marriage,
isn't a terrible thing. Which isn't a terrible thing.
No, it's not. It's actually being fair to yourself and your partner. You know, for me, you know, we've touched on this a few times in our show. I'm not with my ex-wife anymore. We have a child together. Is the center of my world. I'm not going to change, and I have no regrets around that, Zach. Regardless, but what I would say on reflection, that it weren't a smooth start to the relationship with my wife at the time. You know, it was very much what we've been talking about: unfirm foundation, looking for somebody to look after me, not necessarily to build a long-term future with. And you know, it was bumpy even before we got married. And I remember, you know, on my wedding day, having those wedding day jitters, as in, I don't think I want to get married. And I actually reached out for a friend of mine who lived abroad to discuss this with this individual. And they were very balanced in what they said, but I twisted it into my mind it was a good idea to go through with it. You know what I mean? And in a grand scale of things, obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing and all the rest of it. It probably wasn't. Do you know what I mean? To pretend. And I'm being open with that, Zach. You know, I'm glad I did, because I've got a beautiful son. He's 8 years old, and you know, myself and his mum. I hate the term ex-wife. It's horrible. His mum. You know, we are a lot on the same page. But again, you know, it took a lot of me coming from a boy to a man through that process to actually own where things are at, really. And again, you know, this is relevant to what I was saying before. I feel there's a lot of people out there who are in relationships with a male or female, they're just not happy. And unfortunately, that can actually lead into abusive relationships, Zach. They might not have started off abusive, but they can go that way if one person is out of whack with the other, where they become the victim or the perpetrator. I've seen that happen as well.
And Joel, I think one of the people that you can end up abusing the most is yourself, because if you put yourself into that very difficult situation, you're the one who's, you know, the other person may be a great person, the other person may just be, you know, a fantastic person. I mean, very, very possibly they're a fantastic person. You love them to death, but not for you.
Yeah.
And you didn't, you know, you weren't open and you weren't honest, and now you're like, you know, but there's also a thing, and guys, I don't want to sit there and say you lied to yourself for that whole trip, because you know what? I've been married 3 times, Joel. I don't regret any of those. Like you said, you know what? I've got a 32-year-old son who's in Japan doing wonderful, wonderful things from my first wife, the one who was pregnant at 14. Oh man, I'm telling you,
Dude, I love it. Own it, man.
So the second one, you know, Justice, he's here in Colorado, and he's doing wonderful, wonderful, brilliant kid. Just so brilliant, fun to talk to. He and I can talk about hockey and baseball and politics. You know, we talk about all kinds of things. Great. And now that I've gotten married to Adrian, I have an addition of 3 adult children and 7 grandkids all of a sudden, you know. So, you know, every time it's just a learning experience. The one thing that Adrian and I did, though, before we even reconnected in person, is we started saying, look, this is who I am.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it's kind of funny. The one thing that Adrian still brings up all the time: if the Devils are on, Zach is not available.
Yeah.
If the New Jersey Devils are on, Zach is not available. And she still respects that to this day. And now it's actually kind of funny because if the New Jersey Devils are on, Adrian's not available either because she said sitting there watching him with me now. So, and she had never even watched hockey. She didn't even know what hockey was before she met me 4 years ago. So, but we were able to, Joel, take in we we talked about anything and everything we could possibly think
Yeah.
of. And we kind of saw it as this. You know what? Here's my life. This is what I've done.
Yeah.
Here's a lot of the stupid shit I've done. You need to be, because you're going to hear about that. Okay. So here's what I've done. This is what I've learned from it. Okay. Here's the great things I've done in my life, according to me. That's what I'm proudest of. And here's the mundane crap that I still do today. And you throw it all on that pile, you go for it, and you really treat it like, you be very open, because if there's something that somebody's going to sit there and go, you know what, I think I can work around this. Maybe not. It was a good chance for us to say, I'm sorry, I don't think we see eye to eye here. Let's not do this to ourselves. We're both getting a little bit older. Well, I'm getting a lot older. She's getting a little bit older.
Yeah, and as you were talking there, Zach, and obviously reference you made about your previous marriages, uh, we all make mistakes, and maybe the decisions at the time maybe were foolish. What matters is what do you do after that. And the only person who will always be the fool will be you as an individual, ownership for that.
Yeah.
There's one person you can never fool, never lie to, and that's yourself. You'll always know the truth. And that's an awful place to be if that being the fool becomes your default position. And again, we touched on this before in previous shows, the whole thing around, I think a lot of men don't intentionally go out to make foolish decisions. I think a lot of it is peer pressure, but also the fear or rejection, the risk of rejection, or whatever, to allow people to see behind the mask, the emotion, the mask of emotion, whatever you want to call it. But sometimes it's important to take that risk. You might not on your first date go, here's my life story. That's probably not perhaps a good idea to be. But if you've been open about those building blocks to start that relationship, then why not do that? Why not be that way? I've always been accused of being too honest around things. And sometimes it has quite a detriment, Zach, but other times it's really served me well, particularly further down the line if a situation has come to a head of a previous poor mistake, say with a new boss or a new partner or whatever, that it damage limits what comes back. Because they've known from the beginning, like you saying, you've been upfront with somebody, although some of those decisions might not have been great at the time, and you're willing to own it, then that's kudos for yourself and the events that unfold. And it's really important to, I personally think, and obviously from what you say, it's really important to own your shit, as they say.
That's exactly it. Look, where the roadmap may have taken a few askew turns, you
Yeah,
know what? This is still Frankenstein's monster right here. This is what those turns created. Can you live with this? Because guess what? You may come into this relationship thinking you can change me. You can't. You,
yeah,
you can't. And I may come into this relationship going, I can change for her.
yeah.
No, you
No,
can't. No, you cannot.
no,
Not happily.
no.
And you're never going to fully change, because that's always going to be in your mind. There's going to be that one time when you get into that argument and you're going to be like going, you know what? I gave up this for you. And that is the worst thing in the world you can do. No, you gave up this for yourself. You didn't
Yeah,
give it up for them.
yeah,
You thought you were thinking with the other body parts, or you were thinking that, that I wanted to be with this woman so bad that I would give up what this is. They didn't do that.
Yeah.
You did that. So coming at them, and at the end, or during a fight or something like that, that's just it's not correct. And the other thing is, it's just not smart to say something like that.
Definitely not. But again, this is a really important thing to do as well. It's for me, obviously, the relationship with my son's mum. The relationship broke down.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And to some degree, there was a level of abuse in there. But what's really important with about men being fools is if a relationship breaks down, you can't just go, it was all her fault. You know, she made me do this, she made me do that, it's all her fault, or it's all his fault. No, 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 you're both responsible for the relationship breaking down. It's not just one person. And that can be really hard if it has been an abusive relationship, Zach, when it's been physical, mentally, emotional. Don't get me wrong, but there's two people in that relationship. There's been two people who have chosen, for whatever reason it is, to remain it, for it to get to that level of abuse or difficulty or whatever. And we talked a bit about this in the break, which is why one of the reasons why I eventually followed through it and left my wife at the time was the impact it was having on our son. He was 3 years old, it was still having an impact. And I know plenty of people I've worked with where they've kept in it for the children, and that level of abuse has got worse and whatever. And social services have stepped in and they've removed the children. And if the parents would have actually took ownership years before, that would have never happened.
And that is probably the worst April Fool's somebody could do. That's look, when it comes to it, somebody who would stand up and do something like that for their children, in their heart, they think that's a good thing. But in reality, these kids, where we think they're not bright well, we all think our kids are brilliant. We all do. We all think our kids are brilliant, yet we think that they're too damn dumb to see that something is going wrong in a relationship, which just doesn't make any freaking sense. You're going to sit there and talk about how wonderfully, smart your child is. Yeah. Oh, but they don't see a damn thing going on here. No, that's so wrong. First off, your kids are one of the dangerous things is your kids are seeing this is okay.
Yeah.
And you're teaching your children this is okay. We've all heard that saying, you're going to marry your mother, you're going to marry your father, you're going to marry someone, because that's who you grew up watching. That's what you grew up. That's what your expectation of marriage is. That's what your expectations as a young child. That's what your expectations of a relationship is.
Yeah, and it's the classic one that I hear a lot of people that I work with in the past. They're going to April Fools. They were like, "Oh, I made a commitment when I left home that I'd never be like my mum. I'll never be like my dad." And guess where they find themselves in exactly the same sort of marriage or worse. Because as we know, like the biggest fool of all people, when we try and run from something. We just face it and then go, "Hey, you get me? I'll do my best to deal with you." Got last chance of it. So went up. That was classic. I'll run the best as I can. Use it for fools. That being successful and running away from not being like your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister is like trying to run away from your shadow. It doesn't happen, does it? That let's be honest.
I remember looking at my dad and him doing some of these stupid ass things when I was younger, like, why in the hell does he even think that's funny? And now I'm sitting there and I catch myself doing them and I'm like going, you're an idiot. You're old now. You're so old now, and I look at my kids or I look at my grandkids when I do something like this, and I can see that face that I recognize. I can see that face of them going, the hell is wrong with this guy? And it's like, oh my God, I've turned into my father. I have done it. I can only be so lucky to be my dad, to be honest with you. He's one of the greatest people I know. Um, uh, I, but he's made his mistakes too, and he had to go through it, and
Yeah,
he's had to live with it. And look, we can't become good men if if we don't recognize who we are, if we're not faithful to first and foremost ourselves and realistic with ourselves, and realize that, what, I'm getting a little bit older, I'm not in a relationship, I'm letting everybody down. This is because, no, that's putting a lot of pressure on yourself
yeah,
that you don't need to be putting on yourself, because relationships are crapshoots anyway.
yeah.
Okay, because what I liked 10 years ago, I don't particularly like now.
Absolutely, and the other thing, there's some really beautiful things we're touching on around this, and again, talking from experience. When I was young, my dad wasn't really there, for various reasons, and there was a lot of dislike towards my dad in this time. But when I got older, I got a better understanding of, hey, he did his best in regards to what got shown to him by his dad. And like you said, when I become a dad myself and when I find myself doing some of the similar things to my dad did, it's then what am I going to do with that? Am I going to own that and make better decisions, or not? You know what I mean? And again, all that comes into it. And I mean, some of the things my dad did were hurtful, but were they come from an intentional place? I'm going to do this to cause pain. I don't think so. And I can reflect upon some of the poor decisions at times I've done with my son. Do you know what I mean? And if anything, being a parent or father, whatever, it's not about getting it right all the time, because that's impossible. It's getting it right most of the time. And if you can do that, then you're doing pretty well. And I really want to pick up on a comment that you made earlier and reflect upon that whole thing. At a time when things were really going south, as it were, between myself and his mum at the time, he was 3 years old. And unfortunately, people have this warped, foolish perception, and you mentioned it as well, which is absolutely true. Oh, they're only young. They're not going to remember. And it's like, what people really need to understand from the age of 3 to 5 is the most crucial time in the life of a child, because that's where you're literally doing the blueprint to build your house or your car or whatever it is. You can't build anything until you do those detailed prints or scale drawings. And that's what has happened in that age, Zach, is 3 to 5. That's when your child is literally putting those building blocks in place. So, if a child finds themselves in a difficult environment, particularly when parents are in that foolish mindset, as they're only young, they won't remember. I'll let you into a secret, Zach. They do. They really do. We all do. I've mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. There's a very famous psychologist called Freud, and a lot of it revolved around sex and childhood, and April Fools when people laugh at him. Unfortunately, the reality is it does. And it's usually where a lot of things get planted, surprise, surprise, around the age of 3 to 5 years old. It's absolutely crucial. And although the child might not be able to express it in words, believe me, they've noticed. They've noticed what's going on. And the classic, as we all seem to fall foul of, is for whatever reason, we still have got it in our head that children learn through words only. I'll let you into a secret is that they don't. They learn more about behaviour and facial expressions more than what we would want them to. So,
One of the hardest things to ever hear from one of your kids, and I did hear this from my oldest son when I started having a lot of problems in my in one of my marriages, and he was becoming a teenager,
yeah,
and he was like, Dad, you are the greatest person in the world when we're alone. But when you get back into this family aspect, when you're with me and my brother, you're a wonderful guy. But then when we get back into this into the home, you make that switch. You're just not, we know how much pain you're in. We
Yeah.
can see how much pain you're in. And look, it it hurt. It hurt a lot. I was like, I don't want my kids to have to see this. And I was fooling myself, Joel. I was absolutely fooling myself, and I was tricking. I was making a fool of myself because I knew how I could. I've got it. I know I'm miserable, so I'm going to add alcohol on top of it.
Yeah.
And so I would drink more than any human can possibly drink, because I knew that's what it would take for me to be happy.
Yeah.
And boy, was I wrong. That alcohol, all it did was make things maybe a little bit better for a very short amount of time,
Yeah.
until I woke up and realized how much worse I'd made things.
Absolutely. And again, it's the whole thing of, not only do you feel yourself once to think you can handle a unhappy relationship, marriage, whatever, you don't feel yourself twice. I think you'll take a bit of something just to just take the edge off it. That'll be okay. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of people do actually end up getting into substances. A lot of people, particularly out of choice, that won't come along, open a packet of fags and start smoking, or stick white powder up the nose or whatever. Even then, some of those have been the foolish. Oh, somebody else is doing it. I've got to look hard and look tough. I don't want my mates to have a go, and they go along with it. So that's how a lot of people get into something, even to try and cope with the pain of something. What you're talking about there, or the bravado of it's something what somebody else does. Do you know what I mean? And that's where a lot of it can start on that slippery slope, really, around that. But again, what we keep coming back to is this theme of we all make mistakes. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not here, and I'm not hearing from you saying, do you know what I mean, we're perfect, because we're far from it. If anything, as men, we all will make mistakes. It happens. You can be the most educated person in the world and still see some disastrous things. But if anything, be clear with your motives from the beginning. We're back to the importance of discernment. And if you make that mistake, and unfortunately I've done it, Zach, knowing it's wrong to do something and done it anyway, there's a classic male thing that we do. At least then try and deal with the fallout of the shits afterwards. What's that? I can't read it. Read it out.
That's a horrible idea. What time?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And again, joke aside, it is a class male. Yeah. It's one of the things, obviously, we talked about in the pre-show bit. A lot here, which we talked around the idea of relationships and the impact on that of men, and different ways a man finds themselves being a fool within that. And again, all that comes back to what we've been talking about, is the one relationship which is most important in a person's life, and the one where they fool themselves the most, is the one with themselves. That's where a lot of it starts. And I guess that kind of segues into, when I work with the particular men that I work with, they tend to have issues around 3 areas in their life. And one of them is obviously been talking about relationships, the classic what we talked about before, where men seem to learn better when it comes to money. And they lose money. It seems to whatever reason have a more impact on the man to make changes sometimes than a relationship. And there's been a lot at the moment which is actually happening in the UK, where a lot of these court cases are now actually coming to a head, of men who have lost lots of money because of the Bitcoin investments. It was a big. It's really interesting how things go boom and bust in the UK, and usually involve men. We had the whole thing of websites, the boom and the bust of that. Then we had e-commerce, and now the recent one flying through the UK. I don't know about the US. Is the whole Bitcoin, where men think they can be very savvy, which they can be sometimes with money. And we talked before, men are very logical in how they approach things. But unfortunately, that logical thinking is warped. They still go ahead with it. So a lot of men can be attracted to shiny things like Bitcoin. Ooh.
Yeah.
And lots of businessmen invested a lot of money in Bitcoin currency. And unfortunately, a lot of the market collapsed because there was a lot of fraudulent brokers in the process. A lot of money lost.
And that's exactly what we started talking about. It's like, that is a man. Oh wow, look at this new shiny thing. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to become, that's what I want. I want that shiny car. I want that shiny object right there. That's mine. I'm going to take and I'm going to run with that and I'm going to make it into something special. Holy shit, I'm underground.
Absolutely.
And, we try to hold on to that shiny object, as tight as we can, even if it's taken and doing damage to us. When we need to realize that life is not a shiny object. Life is life. Life is this. It's not shiny. It's painful.
Yeah.
It's depressing. It's happy. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's confusing. It's it's all these things. It's not a shiny object. It's something, and it's not a fad.
Yeah.
Life, I mean, I guess life is kind of a fad. I used to have a mullet, so I mean that was a fad, I guess. But
yeah, you've touched something which is really important there, and again, the nature of the men that I work with, but men in general. Usually, the more successful a man becomes, and I use that in brackets because a lot of men judge their success by external measures, the bank account, the car, blah blah blah. That the more problems can occur, and classic, what you referred to there. A lot of these men invested in Bitcoin, and a lot of them were very intelligent men, and they still did it. But then when the numbers start to go down, it's the whole thing of, oh, it'll turn around. It'll be okay. I know what I'm doing. Billy, Fred, and Jim are still in it, and Billy, Fred, and Jim are thinking exactly the same. Oh, I'm going to continue with it. And then they're foolish enough not to cut the losses. And I think that's what a lot of men struggle with. Women find it easier than men to cut the losses, by the way. Men find it a lot harder. So I think it's that whole thing of facing your pride, which a lot of men struggle with in facing the pride, particularly around financial decisions. And the classic buying that car because it looks shiny, but then it starts causing classic. Actually, there's a guy who I work closely with who's a fantastic videographer. He's really good at what he does. But in previous life, he worked for one of his internet companies, like selling internet to people who didn't need it, basically, or the highest brackets didn't really need, sorry. And he got a massive paycheck, and on his bucket list was buying a car which was called a TVR. They were, I don't know if it still exists in the UK, they're handmade cars. And although it sounds great from one perspective, the quality and how they were put together was always questionable. But he got his TVR and he bought it. I can't remember exactly, but let's say he had it for 8 months. Of those 6 months, it was in the garage.
Yeah.
Then he bought it for $6,000. He spent $4,500 on it in 6 months, and eventually he sold it. To be honest with you, he should have never. Yes, of course, he wanted it on his bucket list, and that's why he bought it. But the writing was on the walls like after a month. But it wasn't going to get any better, Zach. It wasn't going to get any better.
Right. And look, the truth is that when it comes to Bitcoin, it is like the stock market, okay? There are successes. There are great successes, but let's be honest here. The ones who see the most success are the ones who can fool you into buying in or to holding on
Absolutely.
and grabbing that dream, because that dream is right around the corner if you just stick with it. Yet while you're pumping everything into it and losing everything, they're going to take you for everything that you got. So you got to make sure, again, stop fooling yourself. Realize, whoa, this is it. I'm done. I can't do this no more. That's not a
Absolutely.
bad thing. Take
Yeah.
risks. By God, take risks.
Yes.
They can tie a bungee cord to your wrist and jump off that bridge if that's what you want to do. You know, but realize,
Yeah.
okay, bungee cords could snap,
Yeah.
and those rocks, they don't get any softer for you. So yeah, those rocks are not going to give a damn if it's you coming at them or someone else. They're going to hurt. So take those risks. Just realize, I think I've had enough. I think I've learned enough here. I'm going to back away now.
Absolutely. And for the people listening to this, we're not saying don't invest in stock market or Bitcoin or anything like that. What I would say, and my mum taught me a lot. So if you're going to invest, whatever you're going to invest in, whatever's going on at the time, go with the thought process of not what you have to invest, but what you're willing to lose. So if it really does go tits up, then hey, you've already made that decision at the beginning when you went into it. Do you know what I mean? And that's what it's about. But also as well, like you said, you can do well on the stock market and shares. But you've got to have a lot of capital at the beginning to start off with, potentially what you're willing to lose. But also, as you know, I've invested something in stocks and shares. It's not particularly a lot, but I don't know if you know, Zach, if you've done it. You can actually choose the level of risk you want to take.
Yeah.
So for me, no risk, half a risk, and full risk. I've gone half risk, but I take ownership in that. If I lose a lot, I lose a lot. There ain't no way in God's green earth that I'm going to go all in full risk, because that's not me. So you can still take responsibility of not being a fool by being aware of your own motives, around that, really.
There's no advisor that's going to tell you to ever take and put more money in high risk and less money in the moderate risk. Okay, they're going to tell you, you know what, you need to make sure that you've got a safe amount here. Yeah, let's go for it. Let's put this amount here. Let's put a third here. A third here. Let's put a little bit on the higher risk, and high risk, high reward, high fail. You
Yeah,
know, but there's never going to be somebody who's going to say, you know what, to hell with these other ones. Let's go all in on this.
yeah.
So, but hey, Joel,
And
how do people get a hold of you, my friend?
yeah, so in regards to how people get hold of me, Zach, the information's on the bottom here. You got a scan me code there to book a virtual coffee. Our website's there, www.rewiredformen.com. And either way, as we say every time we do this show, anybody's got any particular questions or disagrees with anything what they've said, they can reach out to me through my website. My email address is on there. They can reach out to yourselves. And hey, it'd be great to have somebody else here as well. This is what we're here for. Welcome any comments, questions, feedback, criticisms. Hey, it's all good. It's what I would say to that.
That's right. And I mean, we'd also love to hear your opinion on any of this, maybe your story, because as we always say, look, your story can teach somebody a hell of a lot. There's somebody
Absolutely.
out there who's going through the same things that you've went through, and they're looking for someone to help guide them around that corner, safely around that corner. And if you can help them get to that next level where they feel a little bit safe and they're able to go from dreadful to dreamscape, let's do this, let's work together, let's make this happen. So
Yep.
but look, the truth is, April Fools is fun. Making a fool out of yourself, not so much. You know, in which, yes, we have a tendency of doing this. Yes, yes, we do. But you know, just remember that it's really within you on how much of a fool you make of yourself. So
Absolutely, Zach. And I guess if anything, April Fools is fun long as you know where the line is to draw to not hurt somebody.
yeah.
As well. That is a big thing we've been talking about as well. Particularly
God, to
around
any ex-wives out there, don't be calling your husband, ex-husband, telling him that your kid knocked up. Man, that just wasn't cool. That wasn't cool. If that would have happened to me today, I probably would have had a heart attack. I would have been crawling all over the floor crying, you know. But if I found out I had a 15-year-old kid, I'd probably be crawling on the ground crying too. So that would be dramatic for me. But um once again, we've been talking to Joel White, Rewired for Men. Joel is a partner. He's a platinum partner, which means he is a huge supporter of everything that we do. Joel, I want to thank you very much for doing this, and we're going to be throwing these recordings out whenever we get a chance. Because look, men, we understand right now it's kind of tricky being a man.
yeah,
Okay. It's tricky getting through all of this bluster that we have to go through right now, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to figure out who you can be, what you can be. Look, the truth is, figure out who you are and be that person.
yeah,
You know, none of us want to go out there and make an ass out of ourselves, and we really shouldn't want to go out there and make an ass of anyone else.
yeah.
Let's, you know, let's work on being the best we can be, and I think that you're off to a good start. So thank you, Joel. I appreciate it, brother.